Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Aron Nimzowitsch, my system. The customary quote: your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. From the American industrial designer and co-founder of the multinational technology company Apple, Steve Jobs. A brief review of the last part, where we started the 6th chapter, Elements of Endgame Strategy, with some introductory remarks regarding the chapter by Nimzowitsch, and then discussed the concepts of centralization and the shelter, bridge building, with illustrations given by Nimzowitsch. So now, moving further into the book, Nimzowitsch discusses regarding the aggressive rook position as a characteristic advantage in the endgame. Examples and argument. The active officer in general, Dr. Tarash's formula. Nimzowitsch writes, the advantage of an aggressive rook position in the endgame is the most important one. Consider the skeleton position on the left side of the board. In this position, assuming that both players still have pawns remaining on the king's wing, the position of the white rook can be made the basis of an advance on the king's side. Still more is this the case in the configuration shown in the position on board. White can, by means of h4, followed when convenient by h5, and h takes on g6, lay bare black's g-pawn to attacks. And whereas the white rook is the very soul of this new operation, the black rook cannot muster up sufficient elasticity to get over to the king's side to oppose a defense against the former's attack. And so we formulate the matter thus. The weakness of the defending rook lies in its deficient elasticity in the direction of the other wing, and further in this too, that the enemy king wins greater maneuvering freedom. As a rule, he is afraid of rooks, but when the cat's away, one can imagine the rest. In the position on board, therefore, the threat of the white king's march to b6, naturally by slow stages, is on no account to be underestimated. It is of daily occurrence in games between masters that one of the parties will undertake extended maneuvers and go to immense trouble simply in order, as a reward for all their pains, to get for themselves the aggressive rook position. That is to say, to force a passive roll on the enemy rook. On the other hand, we must expect the passive rook sometimes to go on strike, as happens in the following example. In the position on board, black with the move begs to be excused from the passive roll intended for his rook, rook a7, and plays rook b2 instead. Rook takes on a5 and rook a2. The black rook now is very mobile and the draw ought to be assured, whereas rook a7 would probably have lost. We may then say that if faced with a choice of protecting a pawn with a rook and of thus condemning the rook to a passive, indeed meditative existence, or of sacrificing the pawn without further ado in order to employ the rook in some active capacity, we should decide on the latter alternative. When is a rook's position taken in regard to their own or an enemy passed pawn to be considered as aggressive? This question has already been answered by Dr. Tarash, whose excellent formula runs: the rook's proper place is behind the passed pawn, whether it be their own or an enemy one. Consider the position on board. White with the move plays rook a3, taking up their position behind the passed pawn. The rook's influence is enormous, for the rook breathes into the passed pawn some of their own life. On the other hand, if it were black's move, they must not post their rook in front of the pawn, not rook a8, otherwise rook a3 and white wins. But on the contrary, behind it, and this they can do by rook d2 check, king f3 and rook a2. The rook position thus gained is aggressive, number one, with regard to the white g-pawn, who, if opportunity serves, may be gobbled up. Number two, having regard to a possible journey of the white king. For instance, should the latter reach a6, black can shut him in by rook b2, or should he venture to b8 or c8, subject him to a series of checks from behind. It is not only in the case of rooks, but also in that of minor pieces, that the difference in value between an attacking or defending piece weighs heavily in balance. The weakness of a defending knight lies in the fact that they are unioperative. He cannot move about and still keep up the defense of the point under their charge. This characteristic favors the zugzwang. In the position on board, black with the move will succumb under zugzwang. White with the move, on the other hand, suffers only in appearance from a similar disease, for the agile white knight can develop all manner of threats. White plays knight e3 or king d5 with the threat knight e5, and the zugzwang weapon is again at black's throat. If the whole position were moved back one row, white king e4 and so on, black king e6 and so on, white would still win. In a defending bishop, one characteristic stands out, that in the capacity to change front quickly, they cannot compete with their attacking colleague. This is brought out in the delightful winning attack in the position on board. The black bishop is here defending, and the white bishop threatens to get to b8 via h4, f2 and a7. It looks indeed as if this threat can be comfortably parried by a timely king a6. Thus, bishop h4, king b5, bishop f2, king a6, and if now bishop h4 with the threat bishop d8 to c7, the black king can get back to c6 in plenty of time. White, however, plays bishop c5 in order to cause the black bishop to make a move and at the same time prevent bishop d6. Bishop g3, now white's bishop goes back to get within range of c7. Thus, bishop e7, king d6, bishop d8 check, king c6, bishop h4. And black will no longer have time for the resource king b5 to a6, which he used before, for white has managed to gain a move. So bishop h2, bishop f2, and white wins by bishop a7 to b8. For example, bishop f4, bishop a7, bishop h2, bishop b8, bishop g1, bishop f4, bishop a7 and bishop e3. A lovely ending. Moving further, Nimzowitsch discusses the next element of endgame strategy, the rallying of isolated detachments and the general advance. He writes, since these two maneuvers are very closely connected so that the one often merges insensibly into the other, they will here be considered together. To bring single scattered detachments into contact with one another cannot be difficult. One has only to know the bearing one piece has on the other. We know several things. For instance, that knight is able cunningly to construct a shelter for the king by building a bridge. We know too that this officer does not despise the hospitality of a private soldier, knight protected by a pawn, and in gratitude is ready to draw their sword if it comes to defending their humble friend from one of their own class, or to an onslaught on an enemy pawn. See in this connection the white knight at f5 in game number 10 of the illustrative game section, move number 38. We shall go through this game towards the end of the video series along with other remaining games from the illustrative game section of the book. Once the series is complete, you can fast forward towards the last few videos to look up the game and the particular move mentioned by Nimzowitsch here. Nimzowitsch continues. We know further that a king stops the holes made by the advance of his own pawns, and we must not forget that a centrally posted queen can gather far off pawns into her net, as discussed previously. The contact between the white pieces in the position on board would be by no means barred. Again, the advance must be a collective one. For a passed pawn suddenly to run wild and rush away from their protectors and friends, as discussed previously, is an absolute exception to the rule, which may be stated thus. The advancing pawn must stay in close contact with their own people. The place vacated by the advance of a pawn must be as quickly as possible taken by a hole stopper. Thus, the square e4 left vacant by e5 should speedily be occupied by, say, knight e4 or king e4. Instances could be multiplied. It happens sometimes that an enemy rook, by annoying checks, seeks to disturb a combined play, in which case the rook must be reduced to impotence or driven home. Nimzowitsch here refers to the endgame illustration from the game Alfred Ehrhardt Post versus Alexander Alekhine, played in 1914. Since this illustration is just a few pages away in the book, it will be made available in the next part of the video series, so you can fast forward to it once the next part is available on the channel. Nimzowitsch continues. Combined play forms 80% of the whole of endgame technique, and the details which we have treated, such as centralization, bridge building, the shelter, hole stopping, are all subordinate to one end, combined play. Like a ratchet wheel in a piece of clockwork, they see to it that mechanism gets into motion. They intend to ensure a slow but safe forward movement of the serried or standing close together ranks of the army. A general advance is the order of the day. The student should note that a centralization is possible even on a remote flank. The pieces simply have to group themselves around a pawn as center, and there can be no question but that centralization is effectively carried out. Nimzowitsch again refers to the endgame illustration from the game Alfred Ehrhardt Post versus Alexander Alekhine, played in 1914, which we shall go through in the next part of the video series. So once again, you may fast forward to it once the next part is available on the channel. Alright, we conclude this part of Aron Nimzowitsch, my system here, and we shall continue onwards from the next one. Shout out to emptywavefunction for gifting 2 subs to viewers on my Twitch stream last week. Fellow streamer Walker Boy with 1 gifted sub and for continuing his sub. Fellow streamer and YouTuber Fortuna Chess Coach aka Jacob with a gifted sub and also continuing his sub. Jacob recently conducted an interview with me on live stream, so a special thanks to him for his kind effort and positive influence in the chess community. I will post a link to the interview in the video description as well. F-Pawn and ChessFabregas for continuing their subs. Fellow streamer and YouTuber Skierly aka Derek, the top cheerer with 1900 bits. ChessFabregas at second with 777 bits. Offbeatopener at third with 500 bits. F-Pawn at fourth with 400 bits. Chess with OV at fifth with 300 bits. OV is a strong and improving chess player who recently started streaming chess and is doing a fine job of it. He is smart and intelligent. Do check out his fun stream. I will post a link to it in the video description. Lord Blizza at 6th with 100 bits. Watches at 7th with 64 bits. Sacrificial Ninja at 8th with 10 bits. And then Anonymous Support with 150 bits last week as well. Thank you very much for the kind support, everyone. Much appreciated. Alright, till next time, take care and stay safe.